Good afternoon, class. This is John Van Slyke providing a supplemental version of today's lecture. As you'll recall, those of you who were in class, we ran a little bit short. I didn't quite accomplish all that I had hoped to before the close of class. So I do want to make just a few comments. I think this will be between 5 and 10 minutes, and I want to just set the stage so that tomorrow we can focus more wholeheartedly on the actual case studies of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia, and then later in the week, Egypt. So we left off today, we were talking a little bit, distinguishing between the terms Neolithic. Well, let me start actually with the Paleolithic. We discussed first the Paleolithic period of time, which essentially extends from 2.5 million years ago to roughly 10,000 years ago. The Paleolithic age comes to a close by virtue of the Neolithic Revolution, which happens essentially 10,000 years ago. And the Neolithic Revolution, of course, is characterized by the slow, gradual, but yet steady turn of many humans from a hunting and gathering mode of subsistence to that of horticulture and then agriculture. The Mesolithic period, which is essentially that transition, it follows the Neolithic Revolution. So in the New Stone Age, we have first a widespread practice of horticulture, which increasingly gives way to the practice of agriculture. And again, those are distinguished essentially by the level of deliberation, the technology, and even the economic purpose that the domestication of food comes to occupy. No longer is food simply produced for subsistence purposes, which subsistence being simply the purpose of feeding one's family or immediate kin. Now we're looking at agriculture, where people are actually producing food for the purposes of profit, which gives way to a surplus both of produce, but also to a surplus of labor, which then the people will use. As we can see here, we see trade and specialization of crafts. Because we have the surplus of labor, now some people can turn their attentions away from food production to more sophisticated, not that food production is unsophisticated, but more elaborate, we'll call it a division of labor, whereby some people produce the food and therefore other people can engage in other endeavors or enterprises, which allows the whole of society to become increasingly sophisticated. This process historians oftentimes refer to as specialization. Here we have people who specialize as potters, who create essentially non-disposable plateware. We have bricklayers, we have brick makers, masons. We will have later on people who specialize in the tanning of hides, so on and so forth. So we see civilization start to show its head in this process of specialization. Okay. As your document that you were to have read for today shows, there was also a change between the relationship of men and women. Women during the Paleolithic and early Mesolithic or early Neolithic period, their efforts and their central significance to food production for their household was significant, and with that, historians and anthropologists and ethnographers have come to believe that women experienced a greater level of prestige in the pre-civilization or pre-civilized world. And this writing talks a little bit about how their lives changed as a result of their changing role within a society that now is becoming increasingly urbanized and increasingly quote-unquote civilized. Okay. So, we'll talk just a little bit. I might have to skip ahead. Let me look at Catalchayuk, which is one of the earliest villages. We'll call this a Neolithic village. It's not quite a city, but today in essentially central Turkey, what is now central Turkey, you could visit this place, the settlement called Çatalhöyük, and it essentially shows it's a predecessor or a precursor to the later cities. So going back to 9,000 years ago, we see that people lived inside a walled city. I say city, but we should use that term loosely. It was more like a settlement. There was an emphasis upon agriculture, 12 different products, and we also see some of the early signs of civilization in the form of religious ceremony and religious practice. More on that very soon. Okay, so this slide tells us a little bit. These are the 7 characteristics of civilization. And if you look at those terms that are in bold, I have rendered them in bold because they help serve a mnemonic device. Those of you who are familiar with mnemonic devices know that they can really help you memorize or remember information. A mnemonic device is essentially a catch that helps you maintain information. Most of you use one. I remember the 4 directions of the compass rose as never eat soggy wheat. That is a mnemonic device for remembering the cardinal directions in their order. So these terms put together spell the word warm-ups. Okay? And these are the 7 characteristics of civilization. So when historians determine whether or not a society that they are studying meets the threshold or meets the designation of civilized or a true civilization, it has to possess some form of writing. There has to be evident within it art, some sort of artistic expression, religion. It has a material emphasis, meaning that you can see a built environment in this society. Okay, so if all the people suddenly evacuated the civilization, there would still be evidence that they were there. This evidence could be in the form of religious shrines, it could be in the form of roads, fences, buildings, so on and so forth. It has a built environment. If you compare this with the hunter-gatherer societies of the Paleolithic era, you might notice that most of their environments were broken down upon their desire and decision to move. So this civilized or civilizations are noted for their material basis, their material character. They are urban, meaning there are concentrations of people, in large concentrations of people, and so there is an obvious footprint where people have found it beneficial to come together for various purposes. Some of these purposes could be irrigation. Some of these purposes could be to have law and order, which will serve their interest in security, their overall interest in security. They have a political and or military structure to them, and finally a social structure. We're going to be talking about these 7 characteristics over the next couple days when we look specifically at the experience of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Okay, so real quick, early civilizations around the world, as I mentioned in class today, a lot of these civilizations, these societies that meet historians' definition of civilizations, began to occur at roughly the same time, so essentially 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, and they had very similar traits. So this, of course, puzzles historians, anthropologists, ethnographers to know what is it about civilization that would cause it to emerge independent of itself in various places throughout the world. So those major sort of epicenters of civilization: Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, the valleys of the Indus River in Pakistan, and then finally the Yellow River in China. So I will stop there for now, and we'll look forward to picking up tomorrow, looking more specifically at the case studies of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. Over and out.